What is up? GoodMicWork commentaries back at you with episode 448. I am your host, Greg Morgan, coming at you extremely late this week. I sincerely apologize for that, but as most of you know, if you listened to last week's episode, I did announce that this commentary would be late because I took a short vacation. I took a trip out to the mountains of North Carolina where about 25 of my beach friends and I all met up in the Smoky Mountains of North Carolina and got a campsite, and I had a big cabin where there was about 10 of us staying, and then we had surrounding campsites with a whole bunch of other people. Some had campers, some had tents, and it was right on a creek there, and it was just a glorious fucking time. Living in Southern California now for the past 7 or so years and living this type of life, it always feels really good to go back and just hang out with some of my lower key, kind of hippie friends. Every single damn one of them play guitar, they're laid back, they're happy, and it was just a glorious time hanging out with really good people. It was really cool, too. I flew into Asheville, and I've never flown into that airport before, but I have been to Asheville several times. Back when I lived on the beach, I would take trips every now and then up to the mountains, and Asheville is a really cool, kind of quirky town. If you like the outdoor life, if you like being in the mountains, that place is for you. Really good beer up there, really good weed up there. It's just a great little town. As a matter of fact, Edge, WWE Hall of Famer, and his wife, Beth Phoenix, both live in Asheville now, and it's a great place. So it was a fun little vacation. It was only 3 days long, but it fell right in the middle of my commentary schedule, which I knew it was going to really affect this week's episode. So all you're going to get from me this week is an extremely Cliff's Notes version of Raw and SmackDown. I'm only going to talk about the major angles, probably going to talk more about Raw than I am about SmackDown, and maybe give some of my opinions on where some of these angles are going. But next week's episode, episode 449, will be a huge one. It's going to be a complete, comprehensive review of the Go Home Raw and SmackDown shows for SummerSlam. I will predict the entire SummerSlam card. I'll probably predict NXT TakeOver as well. So you can expect me to be completely back to normal by next week's episode with a lot of stuff to talk about. So for this episode, it's probably going to be short. My plan is to have it only go about 20, maybe 30 minutes max, but you know how I tend to ramble, so it might be longer than that. But here we are. It's the weekend already. It's Saturday, and Raw comes up in 2 days, and this commentary is really obsolete as it is. So I just want to get up a few basic comments for those of you who have been waiting for me to upload a commentary this week, but I do want to apologize for the shortness of this week's episode. And I also want to apologize to TVTrax for the limited content this week, but hopefully they can squeeze some clips out of this. Why don't we go ahead and start with Raw? I'm just going to kind of bounce around here. I did watch the show sort of in its entirety, but I really skipped around and got a good feel for the show. The show was good, which was nice to see because, of course, last week Raw lost to SmackDown by a mile. SmackDown was a million times better show than Raw was last week, and Raw really bounced back with a solid show this past week on August 7th. The big match of the night, of course, was the last man standing match between Roman Reigns and Braun Strowman. This was a really fun match. I think the crowd was into it. These two guys, as many times as they've worked together, I still don't find myself getting bored with their matches. I mean, they really work well. For two big guys like this, I can't say enough good things about the work of Roman Reigns and Braun Strowman. They seem to always have good matches with each other, which is rare when you put two beefy guys like this against each other. They don't always deliver, but Roman and Strowman definitely do. Some of the highlights in this match was the great running chair shot. I think Roman was going for maybe a spear on the outside of the ring, and Braun Strowman picked up one of the commentary leather chairs and just threw it right at Roman Reigns, hit him right in the face. The chair flies up in the air. It was a perfect spot and could not have gone better. The running spear by Roman Reigns onto Strowman was amazing. He ran all the way down the aisleway and nailed Strowman right in front of the ring, and the crowd just lost their shit during that spot. And then, of course, right after that is when Samoa Joe came from the crowd, reached over the barricade, grabbed a hold of Roman Reigns and put him in the coquina clutch, and Roman passed out. Braun Strowman is still laid out from the spear. The referee starts the 10 count, and Braun Strowman stands up at the count of 9 to win the last man standing match against Roman Reigns. A lot of you guys were tweeting me on Monday that Raw was a really good show, and I really needed to check out the Roman Reigns versus Braun Strowman match, but nobody told me who won. But the funny thing is I knew who won because when I was reading the reaction, everybody talking about what a great match it was, I knew that Braun Strowman must have won, because if Roman did, nobody would be saying it was such a great match. They probably would have hated it. But I gotta say, I'm kind of surprised that Strowman won that. I'm thrilled for him because I've predicted him right from the start, and this is the match that he should dominate. I think that Strowman can be launched as a mega monster, maybe to even that Brock Lesnar level if he is able to go out there and kick all their asses, and maybe, just maybe, even pin Brock Lesnar in the finish. You know, know, Paul Heyman and WWE are teasing that Brock Lesnar could leave the WWE because of all the UFC rumors. We know that's probably not the case. So if Brock Lesnar does lose the title, then Paul Heyman and Brock Lesnar are supposedly supposed to leave the WWE. But a lot of that was probably because Paul Heyman is claiming that Brock is in an uphill battle and that he does not have to be involved in the finish to lose the belt. Well, what if he is involved in the finish? What if Roman Reigns and Samoa Joe are brawling outside of the ring somewhere, Braun Strowman gets his hands on Brock Lesnar, beats the shit out of him, and pins him 1, 2, 3? Is Brock Lesnar really going to leave the WWE in storyline? Or wouldn't you think Brock Lesnar would want to stick around and get revenge and challenge Braun Strowman for the title at whatever the fuck the next pay-per-view is? I was all confused with my pay-per-views last week. I was under the impression that Hell in a Cell was a Raw pay-per-view, but I guess it's a SmackDown, and No Mercy is Raw. I'm completely lost in these pay-per-views. It's so funny that I never know what the hell's going on with the pay-per-views, but maybe Brock Lesnar does stick around for some title matches against Braun Strowman. But whatever they decide to do with Braun Strowman, I think that he should walk out of SummerSlam with the title somehow, because they have built this guy up like crazy. Think of all the matches he has defeated Roman Reigns in. I mean, he's won nearly every encounter since Fastlane, when Roman got that victory over Strowman that pissed everybody off. WWE really recovered from that. Now you don't even remember that Fastlane match, because all you remember is all the other matches that they've had. And I will say this one thing about Roman Reigns. Some people might not agree with this, but when you look at all the matches that Strowman and Roman have had, and all the times Strowman has defeated Roman Reigns, I actually think that Roman Reigns should have won the ambulance match at Great Balls of Fire. Instead of him missing the spear and going flying into the ambulance, which I thought was a hilarious finish, I think maybe they should have had some sort of situation where Braun Strowman made a small mistake and just kind of fell backwards into the ambulance, and Roman Reigns won on a fluke, and then went through the whole thing where he drove Strowman into the 18-wheeler and damn near killed him, and the whole deal. I think that would have been a victory for Roman to get, and then he could have lost all the other ones, because the victory would not have harmed Braun Strowman in any way. The only reason Braun Strowman lost is because he fell inside of an ambulance. It's not like he got pinned or submitted or anything like that. So when I look back at the history of the Roman Reigns and Braun Strowman matches, I agree with the outcomes and the finishes of all of them, except maybe the ambulance match. Considering what Roman did to Braun Strowman after the match, I think he should have also won the match and then tried to put Braun Strowman away forever by ramming the ambulance into the 18-wheeler and trying to destroy him and rid the WWE of Braun Strowman, only for him to return a week later or whatever it was and go on to defeat Roman Reigns in more matches in the future, showing that you just cannot kill this guy. So if I were to change any finish to any of the matches between Roman and Strowman, it probably would have been that ambulance match. Like I said, next week will be a very big commentary where I will give my full SummerSlam pay-per-view predictions, but I'm not going to change from my prediction. I'm really picking Braun Strowman. But if Braun Strowman didn't win, I probably would just have Brock retain and maybe drop it down the line. You got to wonder what WWE's plans are for Roman Reigns. John Cena is going to be making his way over to the Raw brand soon. Probably right after SummerSlam, he will be there. And we've talked about the potential Roman Reigns versus John Cena match, but if you save that match for a bigger pay-per-view, and I've mentioned this in weeks past, I think Survivor Series would be a great place for your Roman Reigns versus John Cena match. If you ask me, that's the pay-per-view that this match should happen on. I think if you build this thing to WrestleMania, I think maybe that match could be a disappointment if it was at WrestleMania surrounded by a whole bunch of other great matches and big-time marquee attractions. If it's mixed in with all of that, it could fall flat and might not get the appreciation it deserves. And when you think about what they did last year at Survivor Series with the huge Brock Lesnar and Goldberg match, you would think they would want to follow that up with a similar big match that looks great on the marquee. And Roman Reigns versus John Cena could be that match, and they might be setting up for that, because you notice John Cena, which I'll talk about in a minute when I get into SmackDown, he's got a match at SummerSlam against Baron Corbin, which I think undoubtedly he will win. John Cena has lost a shitload of SummerSlams lately, and I think this is a match where he absolutely should win. He just jobbed Shinsuke last week. He's going to be coming over to the Raw brand. If they're going to build to a match at some point in the future with Roman and Cena, I don't think he needs to be losing to Shinsuke and Corbin and all these guys on the way out the door to SmackDown before he heads to Raw. If he beats Baron Corbin and then Corbin goes on to cash in the Money in the Bank and become WWE champion, he's now headed over to Raw with his last victory coming against the current heavyweight champion over on SmackDown. So that might be what they're setting up here for, but you know the match is going to take place at some point between Roman Reigns and John Cena, and if Roman Roman can leave SummerSlam without winning the Universal title, move on to something else, maybe another match with Joe or whatever the fuck, and then eventually build to a big showdown with Cena in November at Survivor Series, I think can really help boost the importance of Survivor Series. It has sucked a big pile of balls in the last few years, but they really bounced back last year with a great, shocking finish to Goldberg and Brock, and also the great Raw versus SmackDown match that they had that went nearly an hour. So I think Survivor Series is once again on the rise, and having Roman and Cena headline that show could be a really good idea for that big November pay-per-view. If not, we've always got the Rumble. Speaking of Brock Lesnar and him potentially losing the Universal title at SummerSlam, he was back on Raw last week, and he had a segment with The Miz on Miz TV. Miz has got the Miz-tourage out there with him. And Paul Heyman is out there talking, Miz is out there talking, Miz is totally disrespectful, and then basically Brock just goes on to destroy the entire Miz-tourage. Heyman says that they're going to do some role play, and he's going to make The Miz Roman Reigns and Bo Dallas Samoa Joe and Kurt Axel Braun Strowman or something like that, and Brock is going to give everybody a preview of SummerSlam, and he just annihilates everybody. Each guy got a German suplex and an F5, and Brock was out there kicking ass, so he's got a lot of momentum going into SummerSlam. I'm guessing he'll be on next week's Raw. I don't know for sure. I don't know if he's advertised or booked or anything, but considering it's the go-home show, you would think he needs to be. I think at some point before that match, they need to have all four of those guys in the ring at the same time together doing some kind of a segment, so I'm guessing that's what we're going to get next week on Raw. After Brock Lesnar was done annihilating the entire Miz-tourage, Kurt Axel was apparently scheduled to face Jason Jordan later on in the night. Of course, he can't go because he's dead, and Kurt Angle just finds this random-ass jobber. I forget his name. I don't even have his name written down. And he's just in the back area hanging around, and Kurt Angle sends him out to the ring to face Jason Jordan. And the fans were pretty damn funny. They were actually chanting, I think, one time, "Let's go jobber," which was great. And, of course, Jason Jordan made quick work of him, beat the hell out of him, and won the match. And I'm still hoping that this is leading to something, because if you're judging this angle so far since Jason Jordan's reveal of being Kurt Angle's son, so far this is a complete and total failure. But if this turns out to be a heel turn, or if this turns out to be a big elaborate ruse, and he turns heel, and there's other people involved, Kurt Angle could potentially wrestle at the end of this thing. I've mentioned Chad Gable in the past. Maybe he could be involved because of his Kurt Angle type moves that he's doing on SmackDown with the moonsaults and the ankle locks and all that shit. There's a lot of possibility and potential here, but right now, if you're just judging it, within the first few weeks we've seen it, it sucks. So this angle better improve, and it better improve quick. We had another Bray Wyatt and Finn Balor segment, a little promo by Finn Balor in a small brawl with Bray Wyatt, and then Bray Wyatt appeared on the Titantron after when the lights went out and he disappeared. So they're just building this and building this. I'm guessing the plan is to have the Demon face Bray Wyatt at SummerSlam. We'll see next week if the Demon Finn Balor finally makes an appearance, or if they save the whole thing for SummerSlam, or if they don't do it at all. But considering who Finn Balor is facing, considering who his opponent is, there's no better guy to bring back the Demon than Bray Wyatt. I mean, this has got to be the angle where it happens and the angle where we see it again. Otherwise, what's the fucking point? The plot is also thickening with Dean Ambrose and Seth Rollins. They both had singles matches on Raw against Sheamus and Cesaro, which I predicted last week would probably happen. The first one was Sheamus beating Seth Rollins with a roll-up when Cesaro jumped up on the apron to interfere, and after the match, Rollins attacks both of them only to be overpowered, and Cesaro beats the hell out of Seth Rollins, and Dean Ambrose does not come out to make the save. Later on, Dean Ambrose has a match with Cesaro, and he beats Cesaro with a roll-up, and of course, Sheamus jumps in to attack. Seth Rollins makes the save, and after Seth and Dean run off Sheamus and Cesaro, Dean does the fist thing, the shield fist bump to Seth Rollins, and this time Seth is the one that walks away. So, we've all been calling a big heel turn here by Dean Ambrose. Dean Ambrose, I feel, is long overdue for a heel turn. And as far as the match with Sheamus and Cesaro at SummerSlam, has that been officially announced yet? I don't even know. I need to check the websites and find that out. But clearly, we're going to get a tag team title match between these two teams at SummerSlam. And with all of the speculation of Dean Ambrose turning heel, I mentioned this a couple of weeks ago as well, that maybe they go with a swerve and have Rollins turn heel again. At this point, I think either guy could turn heel. Whether or not that happens at SummerSlam, I don't know. They might want to give these two guys a tag team title run first. They've never been tag team champions together. I think it was Seth and Roman that were tag champs during the Shield days. So to put Dean and Seth together and maybe finally have them on the same page, they go to SummerSlam, they defeat Sheamus and Cesaro, finally they do the fist bump and the whole thing pays off and they hug, and 2/3 of the Shield is reunited, back on the same page. They have a small run with the tag team titles, and then you do the heel turn. I guess it could go either way. So we'll have to wait and see there. But at some point, one of these two guys has got to fuck over the other, you would think. And I don't think they would really throw Roman Reigns in the mix here. You know, if they got Dean and Seth back together, I don't know where Roman Reigns would fit in, so I could probably feel confident ruling out a Shield reunion at this point. But you never know. As we head into the end of the year here and closer to WrestleMania time, anything is possible. We had the Club defeating Enzo and Big Show in a tag team match. And Cass is out there at ringside during this whole thing, and he attacks Enzo after the match, eventually gets hit by the big knockout punch by the Big Show. He goes backstage, Big Cass that is, and starts complaining to Kurt Angle about the Big Show and that he wants him in a match at SummerSlam, but he doesn't want Enzo anywhere around, and he should be locked in a cage. And then Kurt Angle's like, what are you saying? I should lock him in a shark cage? And they come up with the idea to lock Enzo in a cage and suspend it over the ring at SummerSlam during the match between Big Show and Big Cass. God, I hope that's a kickoff match. And what's funny is part of me thinks this is a rib on Enzo, because does anybody know if this guy's afraid of heights or anything like that? We've all been reading the stories of this heat that Enzo apparently has with the locker room. And I've never really been a fan of the whole Enzo and Cass presentation. I've never understood it. I thought Enzo was crazy. I don't know him personally. I have no reason to dislike him personally, but I can definitely tell how some people would think he's annoying. And recently, I talked about it in last week's episode. You know, he went to a strip club and that stripper ranted about him and what a cheap, cocky, arrogant little twerp he was when he came into the strip club, high off his ass. There's been unconfirmed reports of Roman Reigns kicking him off a bus. Cass even has some heat too. And when you look at Enzo and just see the way he is, you know, I could totally see this guy being in a locker room and everybody just, you know, wants to blow their brains out because he's so fucking annoying. Not that he doesn't have any friends. We know that he does. And not that he doesn't work hard. Because if this guy was really a loser, piece of shit, lazy, asshole, prick, unprofessional jerk-off, there's no way he would be in the WWE. I don't care how many t-shirts this dickhead sells. WWE, I don't think, would put up with somebody that obnoxious. So I don't think Enzo was necessarily that bad. I just think he's an annoying person that really, he struggles to work. I mean, he's always getting hurt out there. He doesn't know what he's doing. He can never get out of his own way. And, you know, if you put him over on the Cruiserweight division or over on 205 Live, you know, I don't think he can compete with those guys in the ring. They are 10 times more athletic, the whole entire roster, that is, than Enzo. But if you put Enzo over there for promo purposes and maybe have him get in the ring from time to time and wrestle some matches, he can just add that flavor that 205 Live needs. They don't have any big over-the-top characters over there. And Enzo, despite his problems, still gets big pops. Despite his problems, still can cut a really good promo when he wants to. During that initial split of Enzo and Cass, that was pretty good stuff. I mean, Enzo can be good on the mic. He even legitimately cried during the whole thing. So Enzo does have value, I think, on the roster. With all of these rumors of the heat that he has and the fact that he really doesn't fit in on a main roster. He's not a believable competitor, somebody that could stand up and win titles on the Raw brand. So 205 Live might be the better place for him. Hell, even NXT could be a better place for him. That would be essentially a step down to go back and work and be at the Performance Center every week and going through that shit. But, you know, he's over down there, and the NXT fans still have a lot of respect for that character. So whether they put him on 205 Live or NXT, I think either one would be better than where he is now. And maybe management and the powers that be in WWE are annoyed with his heat that he has in the locker room and the story of the stripper giving him shit and all of that. So maybe putting him inside a shark cage is a rib. Maybe Enzo is terrified of heights in real life and they're just fucking with him by putting him in this shark cage at SummerSlam. But whatever the case is, I have absolutely zero interest in Big Cass and Big Show. We also had a very interesting old school Goldust promo where he basically alludes to the fact that he might be becoming a manager sometime in the near future. He said he's going to be keeping a close eye on SummerSlam and the search is on and he's looking for his new star. This immediately reminded me of Honky Tonk Man back in 1997 where he started going on TV saying that he's searching for his next protege because Honky was past his prime to be in the ring. So he wanted to mentor somebody. He wanted to pass on his gimmick and his look and all of his knowledge onto somebody else. And we at first thought it was going to be Triple H. Clearly, Triple H wasn't going to change his look and look like the Honky Tonk Man, but he was the early favorite to be that protege of Honky back in 1997. And it turned out to be Billy Gunn, who came out as Rockabilly at that In Your House right after WrestleMania 13. And it was like, what a fucking letdown. Rockabilly, are you kidding me? Honky Tonk Man at that time, and still is. You know, you could call him a legend because he is the longest reigning Intercontinental Champion of all time. He was a big part of that 80s and 90s era. So for him to become a manager and help a guy get over, Billy Gunn was just the wrong fit, and it didn't last long at all. So whatever Goldust is doing here and whoever he selects to be his protege, I just hope it's good, and I hope it helps get somebody over. Who it could be, I have no idea. There's too many people to even think about. It could be anybody on the Raw roster, or maybe somebody that's not being used very much right now. If Bo Dallas wasn't in the Miz Taraj, I'd probably pin him for something like this. There's a ton of people in NXT who could be called up at any time. So whoever Goldust's new protege is going to be, I don't care as long as it's good. And it makes me wonder if this is going to mark the end of Goldust's in-ring career, and if he's going to move on to just being a personality or a manager on WWE. I would still like to see him have a send-off match or something. I would hate to see them just quietly transition him into this role without acknowledging his final match or giving him something like that. I think the Goldust character and what a big part of the wrestling business it deserves some sort of a send-off, but it looks like Goldust is on the path to find somebody to mentor. So we'll have to wait and see where that goes there. We'll go ahead and wrap up our Raw discussion with some sad injury news on a couple of different talents. The first one is Bayley. Turns out that shoulder injury that she suffered the week prior is serious, and she is officially out of SummerSlam and her women's title match against Alexa Bliss. She came out on Raw to cut a promo to announce this, and I was really disappointed in the fans that were booing the shit out of her. I understand all of the problems with Bayley. You know, as a male, she's not somebody that appeals to me. I understand that her core audience is young girls. I understand that WWE has completely dropped the ball with her since her call up to the main roster, despite her few bright moments like winning the Raw Women's title and retaining it at WrestleMania. Other than that, you know, WWE's use of her has been shit. But I think when it comes to a legit injury that is affecting somebody's career and their livelihood, and you never like to see anybody get injured and have to go through rehab or surgery or anything like that, it's incredibly sad whenever that happens to a talent. I think that despite Bayley's problems, the fans should have showed her a little bit more respect than that. I bitch and complain about Bayley constantly in my commentaries, but the last thing in the world I would ever wish upon her is an injury that would keep her out of action. So I'm wishing Bayley a very speedy recovery. Hopefully this injury is not that serious. I've been really out of the loop in my wrestling news because of my vacation, so I don't know the details of her shoulder injury. Hopefully this is something that'll keep her out just a few weeks, but it could be more serious and keep her out several months. I really have no idea. You guys can probably fill me in on that, but now since she's out of SummerSlam, they have to find a new contender, or a new challenger, I should say, for Alexa Bliss's title. So what they decided to do is have two triple threat matches on Raw. The winners of those two triple threat matches will face each other next week on Raw to determine the new number one contender. The first triple threat match they had was Sasha Banks defeating Alicia Fox and Emma, and the second one they had was Nia Jax defeating Dana Brooke and Mickie James. So it'll be Sasha Banks versus Nia Jax one-on-one next week for the opportunity to challenge Alexa Bliss at SummerSlam. As far as who I'm going to predict in that, probably Sasha, only because I think Sasha's just an easy replacement for Bayley, you know, babyface versus heel. And you can really kind of book the match the same way that you would if Bayley would have been in there. If you put Nia Jax in there, now you got a heel versus heel program, and you got to change up some of your writing. So if WWE wants to be lazy, they'll just replace Bayley with Sasha Banks. But if they want to completely rewrite the entire thing, they can put Nia Jax in there and go in a completely different direction. So I guess we'll find out next week. And the other injury, of course, is another one involving the Revival. This time it's Scott Dawson getting injured. I guess this is a bicep injury or something like that. Apparently this could require surgery, and he is also officially off SummerSlam, and they of course were building to a match with the Hardy Boys, and now the Hardys are going to have to find something else to do at SummerSlam, and they weren't able to further any of that on last week's Raw because Raw was in Toronto, and Jeff cannot travel into Canada because of all the trouble and all the shit he's been through in his life. So I found that kind of an amusing story. But I guess next week WWE will rewrite something for the Hardy Boys, and you know, when you look at everybody else, who do they work with? If they do put the Hardy Boys in a match at SummerSlam against another team, who is that team? Gallows and Anderson? I mean, those are the only options I think they have. What kind of match would that make at SummerSlam, especially when you're hot-shotting the entire angle, and they've had all this build with the Revival and the Hardys, and now you have to go in a completely different direction. It might be best for the Hardy Boys just to remain off the pay-per-view, which sucks. There's 4 guys involved in this angle, and the injury of one is going to completely kibosh the whole thing. So that's a shame. Hopefully WWE can think of something something interesting for the Hardys to do, but if they can't, I don't want to see them have a throwaway match against Gallows and Anderson for no reason that they could just easily do on Raw. Maybe put the Hardys on the kickoff show. That might get the crowd in their seats a little bit earlier, and maybe fill up the arena a little bit earlier, and it looks good for TV because the Hardy Boys are super over. So if the Hardy Boys do work with Gallows and Anderson, or really anybody else for that matter, I think it should be a kickoff match. But when all is said and done, horribly disappointed to hear about the injury to Scott Dawson. Sounds like it's bad. Sounds like it's going to put him out of action for several months, especially right after the injury to Dash Wilder's jaw and him missing all that time. They finally get back together, start working a strong program with the Hardys, and this happens. So absolutely heartbreaking for the Revival. And so far, since their call up to the main roster, it has just been decimated by injuries. So that fucking sucks. Let's move on to SmackDown here. Not much to talk about on this show. The big match on the show was Randy Orton taking on Jinder Mahal in what they called a grudge match. And like we've seen so many times on WWE TV throughout the years, the champion gets pinned again in a non-title match. Randy Orton winds up beating Jinder Mahal with an RKO out of nowhere. He celebrates, and then as he's leaving the ring, he gets kicked in the head by Rusev, who ambushes him on the stage. I'm surprised they didn't have Rusev come out and cost Randy Orton the match or something like that. A lot of people were complaining to me on Twitter about Orton beating Jinder and how it was bullshit that WWE keeps beating their champions. You know, I get it. Trust me, I totally get it. I see what you're saying. But this is just shit that the WWE does. Randy Orton lost to Jinder Mahal 3 straight times on pay-per-view. Not that we need reminding that Randy Orton is like a 13-time champion and a major player in WWE, but I don't think, even though he lost all those times to Jinder, I don't think WWE wants to put Orton beneath Jinder, so they just reminded people that Randy Orton is still Randy Orton, and he can beat anybody at any time, including champions, with his RKO. But yes, I understand back in the day you did not see champions get pinned like this, what seems literally on a weekly basis. I mean, it's always happening. They always do this shit to further storylines, but this was kind of the blow-off. Randy Orton and Jinder Mahal are done. They wanted to have one final match between the two, give Randy Orton his victory back without giving him the title. So even though I understand the complaints of champions losing, I understand why WWE had Randy Orton win this match. I know what they're thinking in their head, and yeah, that doesn't make sense to us sometimes, but it's just what they fucking do. It keeps Randy Orton strong, and it also keeps Jinder Mahal as champion, so that's exactly what WWE wanted. It's kind of similar to what I mentioned earlier on when I was talking about the potential match between John Cena and Roman Reigns. I expect John Cena to defeat Baron Corbin at SummerSlam, and then if Corbin goes on to cash in the Money in the Bank briefcase, John Cena goes to Raw with a victory under his belt against the current WWE champion. So it's kind of like that. And, I understand everybody's complaints, but with this particular match, it's not something that threw me into a rage. I really honestly don't care. Speaking of that John Cena and Baron Corbin match at SummerSlam that was made official on SmackDown, John Cena came out to cut a promo. Great to see him alive and well. So lucky to come out of that botch with Nakamura last week unscathed. John Cena doesn't seem to be any worse for the wear. Cuts a small promo on Baron Corbin. Baron Corbin comes out to the aisleway and says that he doesn't want to face John Cena. John Cena has nothing that he needs or wants, and basically turns down the match until Daniel Bryan comes out and makes it official that the two men will face each other at SummerSlam. And like I said, John Cena is my pick to win that match. It seems almost a guarantee. A loss to Cena I don't think will harm Corbin at all, especially if he successfully cashes in the briefcase. But who does he cash it in against? Does Nakamura beat Jinder and then Corbin immediately cashes in? Or does WWE continue with their Jinder Mahal experiment? I mean, he has had a nice string of pay-per-view victories here. He just won the belt a couple of months ago. They might want to stay in that direction, and Corbin might not cash in at all at SummerSlam. And there's also the possibility that his cash-in could be a failure. We haven't seen a guy fail at cashing in the Money in the Bank in a while. I think the last guy to do it was... I don't even know. Damian Sandow, maybe? So it's been a while since we've seen something like this, and you can't always have a successful cash-in. You have to have some people fail from time to time, so Baron Corbin could be a good candidate for that. Jinder Mahal wouldn't be the only champion to be pinned on this week's SmackDown. We also had Naomi losing a match to Carmella due to the returning James Ellsworth interfering in the match. A very surprising return by James Ellsworth. I had him pegged to return at SummerSlam and possibly even partake in a successful Carmella cash-in whenever she decides to turn in the briefcase. Really surprised that James Ellsworth showed up here and helped her win a non-title match against Naomi. I found that to be silly, and what I found even sillier is that if you're looking at this as reality, why didn't Carmella cash in right there? After James Ellsworth pushed Naomi off the top rope and Carmella got the victory, Naomi's knocked out. She's out there spread eagle in the middle of the ring. All Carmella had to do was take the briefcase and say, here you go, referee, I want to cash it in right now. Get on top of Naomi, and she's the new SmackDown Women's Champion, just like that. But they didn't even do it because, obviously, they're saving the briefcase cash-in for either SummerSlam or something else. But it kind of made no sense to watch Naomi laid there in the middle of the ring, completely motionless, and Carmella is celebrating this victory in this non-title match. Why did she not cash in the fucking briefcase? I think the shock value was decent. The crowd definitely popped for James Ellsworth's return, but I kind of thought he would come back when Carmella finally cashed in the briefcase. But whatever, Ellsworth is back now, and we'll have to wait and see what they do at SummerSlam and whether or not Carmella cashes in that briefcase on the pay-per-view. The only other thing I'll mention briefly about SmackDown is the Owens and AJ Styles and Shane McMahon promo. I won't talk much about the Usos or the New Day segment or the Fashion Files. That was pretty much typical stuff there. And this AJ and Shane and Owens promo was just a way to set up their match and further the build there. Neither guy really trusts Shane McMahon. Shane is vowing to call this match down the middle. There was even a little scuffle at the end, and AJ Styles accidentally hits Shane McMahon with the Pele kick, and Owens scoots out of the ring laughing. So, Shane is going to be involved in the finish of this match in a big way, you would have to think. Shane McMahon can screw over Kevin Owens or do something that pisses off Kevin Owens, and that leads to some sort of a match at the next pay-per-view, maybe a street fight or a stipulation match of some kind there. I think that can be a potentially great match, and I think the promo work and the build to that between the two could be a lot of fun on TV. So, right now, if I had to pick, I would probably say AJ's going to retain against Kevin Owens, and Owens is going to move on to face Shane McMahon at the next pay-per-view. So there you have it. That'll do it for me this week. I'm going to get out of here. Again, I want to apologize for the short Cliff's Notes version commentary this week, but I'm really behind and still trying to get my act together and play catch-up on everything that's been going on. But check back next week on the YouTube channel at normal time, extremely late on Wednesday or early Thursday for a huge Go Home Raw and SmackDown review, along with SummerSlam predictions and NXT predictions, and we're going to be talking about everything. So next week will be back to normal and probably be a pretty lengthy commentary come episode 449. So you guys have a great rest of your week and weekend, and I'll talk to you in just a few days. Until next time, peace.